Oh, you got. Good morning, everyone. This is the December 20th, 2023 meeting of the Board of Estimates. As we're now called to order, I'll ask everyone who has joined us today to ensure that all your electronic devices are silenced, or you could turn them off just to ensure that we do not disrupt today's proceedings. For those of us who are joining virtually, as we continue to go through the agenda, if it's an opportunity for you to speak, to present to the board, you will be called. Please state your name, where you're calling into the board today from, and then begin with your testimony. At this time, I'll ask our amazing clerk, Ms. Celeste Amato, for any corrections, additions, and noted abstentions to today's agenda. Madam Clerk, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, everyone. This morning, in the absence of Acting City Solicitor Ebony Thompson, Deputy City Solicitor Stephen Salisbury is sitting in and acting on her behalf. Welcome, Stephen. And this morning, we also have the following changes and corrections to note to this agenda and some previous transactions, and they are as follows. There is a correction to transaction SB 23-14584 BDC lease agreement. Under the amount of money and source, please delete $40,896 and insert $3,408. There's a correction to SB 23-14540 Department of Transportation notice of letting. Under background explanation, bids to be received and bids to be opened, please delete January 24th, 2024, and insert February 21st, 2024. There's a correction to SB 23-14718, Department of Planning, 2024 loan authorization, City Board of Finance. Under background explanation, please delete this item is contingent upon the final approval of the City Board of Finance and insert this was approved by the Board of Finance on December 18th, 2023. There's a correction to SB 23-14512, Department of Real Estate, lease renewal, 3500 East Monument Street, and the background explanation. Please insert on September 24th, 2003, the board approved the original communications lease agreement, which provided the right to renew for 4 additional 10-year terms. The initial term was 10 years commencing February 2nd, 2004, and terminating January 31st, 2014. The lessee is exercising its second renewal option commencing February 1st, 2024, and terminating January 31st, 2024. There's a correction to SB 23-14563 for procurement. Increase the Sourcewell contract number 010521, playground and water play equipment with related accessories and services. Under endorsements, please add that law has reviewed and approved this agreement for form and legal sufficiency. We have a correction to SB 23-14115, Department of Procurement. Solicitation RFQ 373, fuel dispensing equipment repair and maintenance services. Under action requested, please delete end date 11/14/2024 and replace with 11/14/2026. And we have a correction to SB 23-14329, Department of Human Resources, position salary grade adjustment. On December 6, 2023, the board approved a salary increase for elected officials. The board is requested to approve a correction to the comptroller's beginning salary from $135,145 and replace with $135,093, and the ending salary $138,524 and replace with $138,470. Sorry, Bill. And we also have a correction to SB 23-13764, consulting contract, MHC Coaching and Counseling LLC. Under action requested, please delete 6/1/2023 through 6/30/2024 and insert the period of the agreement is effective upon board approval through 12/31/2024. Under amount of money and source, please delete $100,000 and insert $99,999. We have no protests or statements of opposition or other statements to note this morning. We have one withdrawal this morning, SB 23-14430 for Department of Public Works. Rejection of bids for Project 1387, WC 1283 Water Main Replacement. and rehabilitation at Baltimore Street, Smallwood Street, and Reisterstown Road vicinity. Again, this item is being withdrawn by the agency. The following items are moving to the non-routine agenda this morning. SB 23-14578, Department of Audits Biennial Performance Audit. SB 23-14483, Department of Housing and Community Development, Payment in lieu of taxes for Hudson Valley Property Group, Eastview Properties. SB 23-14566, Department of Law, Settlement Agreement and Release. SB 23-14586, Contract Number 6000, Manage and Operate Food and Beverage Service for the Baltimore Convention Center. And SB 23-14016, Department of Transportation, and increase to contract value for Project 1246 Automated Traffic Violation Enforcement Systems with American Traffic Solutions, Inc., doing business as Vera Mobility. And SB 23-14015, Department of Transportation, increase to the contract value for Project 1246 Automated Traffic Violation Enforcement System with Conduent State and Local Solutions, Inc. We have the following abstentions to note this morning. The Honorable Mayor Brandon Scott has no abstentions. The Honorable President Nick Mosby has no abstentions. The Honorable Comptroller Bill Henry is abstaining from all travel requests on the agenda. The Deputy City Solicitor, Stephen Salisbury, has no abstentions, and the Director of Public Works, Richard Luna, has no abstentions this morning. We also have the following no votes to note this morning for items that are on the routine agenda. SB 23-14502, Department of Housing and Community Development, purchased by condemnation, leasehold interest in 1811 East 28th Street. SB 23-14496, Department of Housing and Community Development, purchased by condemnation, leasehold interest in 1804 East Federal Street. SB 23-14501, condemnation or redemption, ground rent interest 2835 The Alameda. SB 23-14437, Mayor's Office of Employment Development, Grant Expenditure Agreement, Amendment 1, ARPA Train Up, Jane Addams Resources Corporation. And SB 23-14440, Mayor's Office of Employment Development, Grant Expenditure Agreement, First Amendment, ARPA Train Up, Maryland New Directions, Inc. Again, those were no votes on behalf of the Honorable President Nick Mosby. And Mr. President, that concludes the opening statement.
Thank you so much, Madam Clerk. Before we move on to adopt the opening statement read by Amazing Clerk, I would like to give a motion to defer the following DOT items which relate to the I-83 speed cameras. They've been deferred on previous time by the Comptroller and based off the new rules of the board. In order for us to defer again to our January 24th meeting, it has to actually go before the board with a motion. To formalize it, I'll read in the contracts, and then again, I'll put a motion on the floor and hope that it will be seconded and voted on for us to have more time to discuss with DOT. Those items are SB 23-13356, Project 1246, Final Renewal, Automated Traffic Enforcement Systems, ATVES with MRA Digital LLC. Second one is SB 231-3355, Final Renewal, Project 1246, Automated Traffic Enforcement System, ATVES with American Traffic Solutions Incorporated, DBA Vera Mobility. The next one is SB 2314016, increase to contract value of Project 1246, Automated Traffic Violation Enforcement. The next one is SB 2314015, increase to contract value for Project 1246, Automated Traffic Violation Enforcement Systems, ATVES, and the Conduit State and Local Solutions Incorporated. And the last one out of the five is SB 2313354, Final Renewal for Project 1246, Automated Traffic Enforcement Systems, ATVES, with Conduit State and Local Solutions Incorporated. At this time, I motion that we defer this to the January 24th, 2024 meeting. Is there a second? There's a motion on the floor. Being no second, that means we will have take this item up today. Madam Clerk, I ask that we move this to the non-routine agenda.
Apologies. Could you repeat the second item number, please?
SB 2313355.
Yes, thank you.
So I ask that we move them from routine to non-routine.
That's correct. I don't believe so. You've effectively read them in, but we
So
could confirm
if
the
members
numbers.
are good for the ones that were included on the routine, we're going to put them on non-routine. And I guess with all the noted abstentions and corrections that have been read by the clerk, we'll move forward with a vote for the opening statement.
So moved.
It's been moved and probably second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The opening statement has now been adopted. I now would like to direct the board's attention to a memorandum from my office dated on December the 18th, 2023, identifying matters to be considered as routine agenda items, together with corrections, additions, abstentions, and no votes that have been noted by our amazing clerk. I will entertain a motion to approve all items contained on the routine agenda, which is to exclude the 3 items that we mentioned associated with the I-83 camera contracts.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and probably second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The routine agenda item has been adopted. The first item that we're going to turn to from a non-routine perspective will be on page 2, SB 2314578, Department of Audits. This request is to note biennial performance audit of the Baltimore Development Corporation for fiscal years ending in June 30th, 2022 and 2021. On behalf of the Audit Department, we have Mr. Auditor Josh Pash. If you could begin the testimony, the floor is yours.
I don't have the presentation.
We're working on the presentation.
Good morning, Mr.
We don't have the presentation up yet.
I did a presentation. Can you add Josh Pash? Yeah, that'd be great.
You got it. I think you might have to drag it. That's what she normally does.
There's no.
Oh, yeah.
Try go to layout and do the side by side.
Stack me.
So who is he?
And it's still not showing. That's weird.
I guess take them out and put it back in. Maybe take the credentials away and then add them back on.
Oh, there it is.
Move
There
to
it is.
stage. There we go. Yeah, and then I would just slide it over.
Mr. Auditor, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Comptroller, honorable members. My name is Josh Pash, and I'm here to present the biennial performance audit of the Baltimore Development Corporation. Today, I'll be presenting the audit objective, the scope, methodologies. I will go over the selected performance measures and targets, and then the current findings and recommendations. And then we did not have any prior year review. Our objective was to determine whether BDC met its performance measure and targets, and to evaluate whether the BDC had adequate design internal controls related to those performance measures, which are the number of commercial corridor facades completed and number of permanent jobs created relative to public investment. For our audit methodology, we interviewed key individuals, and we conducted walkthroughs, gaining understanding of the processes, and then we sampled and reviewed the supporting documentation to determine whether the documentation supports the numbers reported, and that information was secure and maintained, and that there is evidence of internal reviews and approvals of that information, those processes. The performance measures: number of commercial corridor facades completed. The target for 22 was 33, and the actual was 37. The target for 21 was 33, and the actual was 40. They both met. And then for the number of permanent jobs per 1 million public investment, with discussions with BDC, we did note that the 21 target of 315 was based on the Port Covington and Baltimore Peninsula project. Since those were delayed during, for COVID, that number didn't meet the target. I also want to note that the actual for 22 was a typing error and should be 142, which is the counterside of the Port Covington project. Current findings, recommendations, we had no current findings, and so therefore no recommendations. We did have a couple of observations, which are not findings, but we brought it to the attention. Number one is the budget book reports actual. So if you'll note it on the slide, it's target and actual. And we, through the audit of BDC, we noted that those numbers are estimates based on discussions with the developers and the different members who are running the projects. And so the recommendation there would be to have some kind of note. We know it's a template and probably can't change actual on the template, but to have some note that denotes that it's actually not the actual number, but estimates based on the information they gathered. And then also to correct the 22 number as 142 instead of 14, add the 2. And the recommendation is to work with BBMR to go ahead and note that it's an estimated number. As I mentioned, there are no prior findings and recommendations. The last time we actually did look at service issue 809 and 814. However, those were no longer performance measures, and there was nothing to follow up upon. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Auditor. I guess one quick question is, do you have any historic numbers on doing that comparison? The comparison of target to actual?
I do. I just don't have them with me right now.
How does this jive up to, I guess, the historic data?
That I'd actually have to pull up the budget book. So I probably get the answer in a minute. So we did look at 6 years, and okay, I'll have to get back to you on that meeting, whether the trend was more of meeting the targets or not meeting the targets. I'm not sure if BDC will have the answer, but I can get it to you by time this is over.
In your expert opinion, I guess, what's the concern to, I guess, the taxpayers or residents to this board when you see a huge variance between the projected and actual as it relates to jobs associated with public dollars?
Right, so the calculation of the permanent jobs to 1 million public investment, it's how much money was put towards the city. It's often when the city will sell a property to a developer at lower than market value, and the difference between market value and the property value is most commonly what the public investment is. The number of permanent jobs per 1 million is based on when that property is developed, how many storefronts, how many expectation, how many employees there. From our view, from my perspective, it's really kind of hard to judge. And so I wouldn't give an opinion whether these targets are
Overinflated?
right. So I think that when we look at the 22, we see 142. One of these things that is a challenge that we mentioned with the BDC is that the numbers are reported when the property is pretty much open for use, and not everyone is set in employment at that time. So they don't actually report back, let's say, 3 years later to see once the project has been open for a couple of years, how many permanent jobs are available. And that might be some information that would be of more relevance to your question of how this is really impacting the city as a whole.
Would that be a finding?
That they didn't report stuff out 3 years later?
Yeah, that maybe it's maybe the strategy moving forward should be that we should do a look back.
Right, so we actually did have that discussion with the audit team and also with BDC. Based on discussion there, it would be a moving target every year, and then when you try to look for trends over years, you'd have fiscal 21, their number would be changing every year, and the actual. Their method and their process, we didn't challenge that because it was consistent across. If that was something that another stakeholder would ask, that would be discussion with them. But based on their methodology, their process, their consistency, not wanting to change historical numbers every year, we did not make that a finding.
Got you.
That was a discussion point that we went back and forth with.
Thank you so much, Mr. Auditor. I think, I raised this point because a lot of times when we go down the path of doing these great development deals, it's sold as the creation of this amount of jobs. It'll impact our tax base. This amount, have this much commercial establishments, entities inside of this particular area. It'll be a catalyst for XYZ reasons. And with that, obviously, the city invests. And the expectation is the return on that investment are kind of the things that are laid out as projections. So when you see a huge delta between, I guess, the actuals and the projections, it's just concerning. So I'm not talking to you, but just kind of just laying it out to the general public of
So
the
what I-
importance of this audit.
Right, so what I put as a recommendation is there are other metrics that are reported through the city that do have, the ability to do that trend analysis that is reported out. That might be another venue to do that, as opposed to having the budget book, which is a static number showing trends, having that updated every couple of years, and then to report it out that way. And then we have the consistency, and then also that tracking that you're asking for.
That recommendation is not in your report, though, is it?
No, we were focusing based on the reporting metrics in the budget book, and we didn't dive into how the city is reporting those other metrics that they have that are not specifically in the budget book, which is that one-time annual. There are metrics that are updated on, I think, a monthly or quarterly basis that are put out by the city, but we did not dive into that because that would have been, well, pretty much out of the scope.
Scope creep.
Yeah.
Got it. Well, I think we're going to probably meet first quarter of next year, so if we could just include that in our discussion, I'd really
Okay.
appreciate it. Are there any additional questions or concerns from members of the board? Hearing and seeing none, this report will be moved on as noted. Oh, I'm sorry. We haven't heard from BDC. President, CEO, BDC, Mr. Colin Talbert, would you like to, there aren't any findings, so I don't know what.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. President, Mayor, Comptroller. As I said, there were no findings in this. We've reported it out. I understand some of your questions and concerns. I think on a project-by-project basis, we could probably answer many of those questions. I don't think our numbers are overinflated. I think, what the actuals versus what is estimated, we can kind of go through that with you to explain those numbers and how we arrive at them. In some cases, it's difficult to get employment numbers from tenants that are in the project, so oftentimes we'll look at the project as it was supposed to be built, we'll look at the square footage, we'll look at their leasing percentages and come up with a pretty good estimate as to how many jobs are on site. But I don't think that they're overinflated, and certainly appreciate your time. I do just want to thank Dan Taylor, our managing director, who put a lot of time and effort into this. It's a lot of work to kind of go through the performance audit, and he did a great job. With that, I don't have any additional comments.
I think the one concern, Mr. CEO, was the delta between, I think it was like, Josh, what was that? What's the number?
Yeah, it was 315
To
was
what?
the target, and 38 was the actual. That was
Yeah.
FY '21.
Yeah, you
So
think
that
that's
was-
related to
That was
COVID?
during, yeah, I think it was during COVID, so obviously
Gotcha.
they weren't leasing office space during that time. The target number for FY '22 was 26, and the actual was 142. So you can start to see like it was made up in the following years, and hopefully that trend will continue.
That's why I asked the auditor, and I thought it was probably germane to kind of presenting the information today of the historic trend to show that COVID had a huge impact on projection to actuals.
Yeah.
But in the past, we've kind of been really consistent on a better ratio of projected to actual.
Yeah, we report this figure too in our annual report, and it's also, depends on the project. So sometimes we'll work on a project like Baltimore Peninsula, which is a significant, building project. But we also have smaller projects that we're working that are more community-oriented that have lower numbers, but the subsidy sometimes is just as significant in a disinvested neighborhood as it might be in an area that has more market demand. So you really have to kind of look at the projects, look at our investment, and see if, the value is there for the taxpayer.
Couldn't agree with you more. Thank you so much. Are there any additional questions or concerns for BDC? Hearing and seeing none, we'll report the audit as noted. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The next item on non-routine agenda can be found on pages 23 through 25, SB 2314483, Department of Housing Community Development. This request is to approve a pilot payment in lieu of taxes payment with the Hudson Valley Property Group Eastview Properties. On behalf of DHCD, we have, Deputy Mayor's doing it.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the board. I'm Justin Williams, Deputy Mayor for Community and Economic Development. I'm pinch hitting today for Housing Commissioner Alice Kennedy, who's on jury duty. So I can present this. I don't know, I think.
That's a good one.
There's no, we probably don't have a presentation.
Right, I don't know
Yeah.
if Department of Finance is on the call too. Bob Senemy was here also. I can present to the best of my ability. The top-level summary for this project is, we're here to seek a pilot agreement that will be necessary because the project without the pilot would have a deficit that wouldn't allow the developer or the acquisition entity to cover its debt service coverage ratio requirements. The properties at issue are comprised of 3 different apartment projects in the East Baltimore area that we're calling the Eastview properties in the agreement. They consist of 217 units total. There's 79 units at the Eastview Commons at 900 North Caroline Street, 54 units at Eastview Place, which is at 1500 North Asquith Street, and 84 units at Eastview Station at 1630 East Monument Street. I think the big need here, and I know there was questions raised at the pilot committee meeting about this specific project, because this is a little bit different where it was an acquisition of property that was existing. And some questions were raised about the investment of the properties. I mean, the key piece here was that the existing properties have HAP agreements with HUD that are expiring. And so the Department of Housing Community Development was thinking proactively to help preserve affordability, not just today, not just 5 years, but 10, 15, 20 years out. And so the vision is that for thinking ahead for this out East Baltimore community, like Oliver, which has seen tremendous growth in the 20 years since the Dawson family fire, that we need to make sure that there's going to be affordability preserved in apartment units for the next couple decades. I can answer specific questions about the project or go into more detail if the board cares to hear.
You can go into more detail if you like.
So the actual specific developer of the property, or I guess the acquisition entity, is Hudson Valley Property Group, which is a New York City-based owner and developer of affordable and workforce housing. They recently did a project that came before this board in 2021 in the Sharp Leadenhall Apartments. They are their full-time focus is on affordable and workforce housing and preserving workforce housing. They've proposed the total development costs are estimated at $26.2 million, which includes a $19.2 million purchase price and $4 million of renovations. The renovations proposed include capital improvements for energy and efficiency upgrades, security system improvements, common area and exterior LED lighting upgrades, new landscaping and site work, and Wi-Fi for all buildings and residents. The unit improvements include water savings upgrades, inclusive of new toilets, shower heads, and aerators. I know there's one question raised in the pilot committee about, I think, that there wasn't much investment or capital needs for this project. As I understand it, for every project like this, HCD reviews the needs assessment that's done on the property, and it just happened there weren't extensive capital needs for this project. I think the biggest driver for this pilot is to preserve housing affordability for 20 years.
Yeah. And could you just explain to us if this deal isn't done, I guess the ramifications associated with the affordability at the
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest concern is that with the rising prosperity in this area from the investments from work from the Rehoboth Metro and Johnson Square Oliver area, EBDI down in Middle East Gay Street neighborhood area, that we'll see the growth and we'll see the kind of gentrification that could push out families who live in this area. Hopkins Hospital and Medical School campus is right there, which could have the workers who might have higher incomes that could force out the future residents and the people who live there now. So that is the biggest driver of this pilot, is to ensure that the HAP agreement will be in place for 2 decades.
And without it, that agreement goes away when?
So there's existing agreements on 2 that will expire in 2024.
You're not sure of the third.
I'm not sure the third either, but I think it was a little further away. But, I mean, I think that between at least the 2 expiring 2024, and then the fact that the acquisition and upgrades wouldn't pencil out after year 4, but for this pilot, was driving the need, and so that's why the Department of Finance signed off on the, kind of the but-for test.
And what's the total impact to city revenues associated with this pilot?
So currently, it's actually a little, sort of unusual too. Currently, the tax payments received from these properties is below the projected pilot payment of $150,000 a year. Let's get that number right. $153,050 per year. The projection is that going forward, after year 4, when the property is reassessed due to the capital upgrades, is that that would increase the assessment, increase the property tax burden. So that's why we're seeking the pilot payment of $153K. The total burden, appraisal done by Starmark Appraisals dated to July 25, 2023, estimates the net present value of the pilot at $5 million. So that'd be a $5 million cost to the city.
Over the course of how many years?
The pilot would be in place for through the entirety of the HAP contract, which would be 20 years.
So basically 153 times 20 equates out to the 5 million.
I'm assuming they're doing the net present value.
Do you know how many new units of affordable housing this will create? It's 0, right?
Yeah, right. This is about preservation of affordable housing units.
And there's no major, a lot of times when we do get into these pilot agreements, there's typically major renovation. There's really no major renovation here. We're talking about like shower heads and toilets and cosmetic stuff, correct?
That's a fair.
Right, that's a fair assessment, right? And I think when you break down like the $4 million of, that they equate to spend, it's like $18,000 per unit, and that's just like bouncing the $4 million off of 217. Do you know the current vacancy rate of this property?
I do not have the rent roll.
I think it's basically normal. So with not significant upgrades and capital investment, the occupancy rate pretty much will stay the same. And the people living there, they don't have really much choice to move because it's site-based, right?
I don't know if there were
It's a
project-based
significant amount of
vouchers.
site-basase there.
Okay, so you might be more in the.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, we've been looking at this for a little while.
I mean, I guess I would push back on the assertion that the occupancy rate would stay the same. Obviously, there would be some upgrades, even if they're cosmetic. That is the kind of flashy thing that would get people to move into the apartment unit.
I just, typically when we do payment in lieu of taxes, particularly when we just had a great meeting with Mr. CFO, and we'll continue to kind of look at it from a council, we look at the structural deficit that's not just going to hit us next year, but as we kind of extrapolate it out over the next 10 years, I think he showed us a pretty interesting graph. It's kind of a scary picture. So every time we kind of look at the loss of revenue, it's really like, what are we getting for it? What are we gaining from it? And what I'm hearing is that without this new pilot, even though it's operated without a pilot, all this time, without a new pilot, that it can't operate the same. Is that accurate?
That'd be fair. I think we'll operate the same with the capital upgrades. Capital upgrades will trigger the reassessment. And that So that kind of disincentivizes the need for capital upgrades, even though you describe them as cosmetic. The fact that there would be a tax increase that would make it not pencil out is sort of what's driving this.
I guess the concern is that the current owner, who's owned it since the 70s, hasn't done any major renovation there. And I think that's fair to say from the discussion that we've had. Now they're looking to sell, and in this transaction, the city's stepping in, providing subsidy to make it more palatable for the potential buyer to buy it from the existing owner. Now, in that deal, how, affordable housing is critically important, typically we see either major renovations associated with the unit, ADA compliance, major overhaul, some additional amenities that kind of facilitate better living for the folks that have been living in these conditions, and a building that hasn't been really renovated in 50 years. But to do like $18,000 per unit without any additional affordable housing unit increase, any major repair to it, and to facilitate a transaction is just, I guess, on its surface, to me, really concerning. That's why we've constantly tried to kind of dig further into the details. I guess, how does this fit into a couple strategies? One, when we talk about the affordability, we kind of talked about that. But two, when we talk about like the structural deficit, like how does this put the city in a better position for that? My assumption is it doesn't, because it's just a new pilot, a pilot that we've never had before. And three, does this fit into this idea of the deconcentration of poverty, particularly in this area? Does this drive mixed use? So like, when I look at all those boxes, I just have a hard time understanding the story of why the city wants to subsidize a private owner of a facility that they've done no renovation to for the past 50 years to make it more attractive for this potential buyer that's going to literally kind of take it over as business as usual. It's not like these out-of-town New York developers going to come in and aesthetically change this and, again, provide more amenities for the residents that have been living in these conditions for 50 years. So I'm just trying to understand why this is so important for us to do in a time when we're dealing with a structural deficit.
I guess taking it back, or from the top, I don't have enough information to concede that there haven't been capital investments in the property for 50 years.
That's
Obviously,
fair.
there was a needs assessment done as part of this acquisition due diligence, and it showed there weren't extensive capital needs required. So I don't know what was done over the years, but that would lead me to believe that there was some upgrades over the years that was done to at least maintain a certain level of habitability of the property.
Has anybody gone to the property?
Has
Has anybody on the board ever been to this property?
I have.
You've been there?
actually drove by the other day, because I was over there in the East Baltimore area, but I don't know the interior design,
Yeah.
the interior features. Regarding the property, I guess it is a mixed, well, I guess the proposed pilot would only preserve the affordable units for 88 units. So it's a total of 217 units of entirety across the three
Got it.
property projects. So there would be the potential, and it should be, as the neighborhood improves, mixed income, like the true mixed income, that it helps generate the positive outcomes we all want to see in the city that has, it's one of my big North Stars in what I do and when I think about policy is that Baltimore in 2015 was the worst place to escape poverty for young black men. And so that's been important to me to make sure we have mixed income environments for people to grow and have exposure to people from different class and different backgrounds. So that piece is here. The developer, I don't have a personal background with, but they had Lisa Sharp Buddenhall Apartments, and I haven't heard, or I don't think anyone has voiced concern about their operation of that facility.
Yeah, I don't know the new developer and have any concerns. They're not raising any concerns. I guess my concern is the combination of, one, structural deficit we keep talking about. Two, this building has operated without a pilot for decades, as long as I've been alive. Why do we need a pilot now in this particular year? Three, this is like helping to facilitate the transaction, the actual sale of this particular property. And four, they say through everything that they provide us, they're not doing any major upgrades or renovations to the facility. So again, it just keeps putting me back into the position, why do we need a pilot? Like, why do we need the pilot to help facilitate? That's kind of like, my neighbor who like to sell their house for a certain amount, but they can't because they haven't done renovations in XYZ year, and the city comes in and say, hey, we'll give you a pilot to sell your property because that's what you want to sell your property for. I mean, that's literally, from a rudimentary perspective, like that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I think
that
that-
we're helping their deal out so they can sell their property to someone else that's going to kind of manage it the same way that they've been managing it for 50 years.
I think the city's benefit of the bargain is that we'll preserve housing affordability for 88 units in this community that we project and expect to improve and have the rates and rental rates that will increase, and it will no longer be affordable to the 50% or below.
And I think that's a larger discussion about if that is the motivation, how do we do that from a best practices perspective? I just had the ability to go to Philadelphia and kind of sit down with the housing authority as well as with their housing folks to really talk about this issue of preserving affordability. And pilot is not at all at the table of their solution, but that seems to be always the itch in Baltimore. But typically, again, that itch comes with either more affordable units or two, significant renovations to very aging infrastructure, and we're not getting any of that out of this particular deal. Mr. Mayor, then Mr. Comptroller.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Deputy Mayor, can you walk us through what the HUD restrictions and the HAP actually do as far as affordability right now that will go away in a few months?
Thank you, and as a reminder, I'm filling in for the Housing Commissioner.
We're sorry, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Who has
Yeah.
jury duty this morning. So, as I understand.
She's probably watching from the quiet room.
So the existing, for the memorandum, the department's covered by the HAP contract. Well, that's will serve. Well, I guess the current 88 units that benefit, they did benefit from project-based Section 8 housing assistance payment contracts and serve residents at or below 50% of the area median income based on the size of the family at the time of occupancy.
But you don't know what the HUD affordability restrictions are specifically for the development. So we know that that's one of the reasons why we want to push the pilot is to replace them. The pilot replaces the HUD affordability, but we want to know exactly what those restrictions are.
Well, I mean, the existing ones would go away, but for,
Yeah, I know, but what are those existing ones?
it's to be the 50% AMI.
Am I- Okay. And then I guess, Mr. President, I got a question that's actually for finance, but I'll yield to the comptroller until he's
Mr. Comptroller?
done with the deputy mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think I'll be long. I just wanted to share with, okay, I don't think so, but I could be wrong. Okay. I wanted to acknowledge that the points that the council president are raising, those were ones that the pilot committee did take up about the fact that there is no substantial renovation happening, and that is unusual. But what I did want to focus on is the fact that what we are effectively doing, as the deputy mayor has pointed out, is we are ensuring affordable units for an extended period of time. And the fact that we're paying for it with a pilot, I know you said that was it Philly?
Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia, that's not on the table, but I'm not sure that means that it's a bad idea. When I look at it from the perspective of how the city more commonly supports affordable housing, usually we pay for that in subsidies up front to developers. And if you take the $5 million that we're going to be providing over the term of the pilot, and break that down by the 88 units of guaranteed affordability, it works out to about $56,000 a unit, which honestly is less than we have often paid in subsidy for inclusionary units and affordable units in projects that are intended to be, to have a variety of incomes. And in fact, if memory serves, and this is going back several years, but I believe that we had paid at some points closer to $80,000 or $90,000 a unit to subsidize affordable units at 80% AMI. And if these units are going to be reserved for people down in the 50 and 60% of AMI range, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it is something we should just not be looking at all, the fact that we're not getting more substantial renovations out of it. But I would say that, to your point, I say this to the council president, the current, soon-to-be previous owner that has not done anything with the building over some extended period of time, maybe it's not a bad thing for the city to be encouraging the sale of this property to someone else who at least will be motivated to do future improvements and
Based off what?
Hold on, and a better job of maintenance, based on the fact that they're going to be trying to attract higher incomes to the units that aren't dedicated to affordability. And that goes back to the deputy mayor's comments at the beginning about how income levels are trending up, and the strength of other developments in the area is creating a rise in the overall status of that part of the town.
So
So
is
I'm
it-
just sort of throwing that out there as ways that we could, if not be super excited about this transaction, at least we could be comfortable that there is a significant benefit being accrued by what we're doing. And also, one last point, sorry, Mr. Mayor, the one last point is that paying out $5 million through the pilot over a number of years is actually, I can't do the present value calc in my head, but that's going to be a significant discount over paying $5 million up front to a developer to guarantee the number of affordable units that this project does. So that was just what I wanted to share.
Yeah, so again, I think that it's important that we compare apples to apples and not apples to oranges. This is a non-traditional development deal because this is us facilitating the transaction of real estate. There's an owner and there's a purchaser. The purchaser has said basically that they're going to keep things the way that they've been running, the way that they are, by not doing any major renovations to the property. It's really cosmetic type of things that they're doing. We're putting money into the deal. We're guaranteeing money into the deal to make it more enticing for this particular purchaser to purchase this particular property. I think that's important to note. And I think this idea around increasing mixed income for this arrangement of 3 buildings, there's no restrictions associated with, as you continue to put money in because you want to attract higher incomes, that you also lift all the ships with the same tide, meaning you do the same renovations for the low-income units. There's no restrictions in this that says that as you continue to try to keep affordability, the type of affordability units that are created is just a particular number. There's no restrictions in this deal that basically says that as it relates to the affordable units that you keep, that you don't concentrate them into just one particular area or one particular building. So again, our city has a very jaded history on concentration of poverty, particularly with buildings like this and owners like the one that's trying to sell that we're incentivizing to sell. The market rate for the building is the market rate for the building. He should sell it for that market rate. and we should negotiate as it relates to the affordability left in 2024 and beyond with the new owner in a way that makes sense for inclusionary housing, and not leave it up to the guys of probably this very reputable company. I have no idea who they are. They're in New York. To care about the residents of East Baltimore in a way that this board constantly talks about how we need to do affordable and inclusionary housing. Those are my concerns. Again, this is a very unique deal, and just trying to understand. The last thing I'll say is, and I know we always go down this pathway of, this is just $5 million over the course of 20 years, but when you continue to compound these types of deals over and over and over again, they take revenue away from the city, and they do directly play into the structural deficit that we're going to have a lot of discussion about over the next 6 months. So with that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was just going to tap in the finance director to try to talk about the financial piece, about the pilot. I know that finance often does not support these pilots, especially Mr. Sinema, who's not here with us today, but want you to try to put this in perspective as far as how it will impact the city's fiscal future, but also what the conditions and what we'll be receiving through the market rate right now. Oh, Bobby's on.
The chair recognizes public sentiment.
I'm on virtually, if you want me to comment on that.
Yes.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry about that, sir.
Yeah. The board recognizes you, Mr. Sinema. You can speak, please.
Hey there, good morning. A couple just comments on, just to respond to some of the comments I've been listening to.
Deputy
the
CFO,
exchange.
the mayor is asking if you could speak a little louder. We're struggling hearing you.
Sure. So, good morning, everybody. Bob Senemy, Deputy Finance Director, virtually. And I've been listening to the exchange. I think, on projects like these, one of the comments that the council president had asked was, how this contributes to the structural deficit. Again, on these types of projects, we have to kind of balance the need to kind of maintain affordable units, which are very important, of course, in Baltimore, with the financial concerns. I think, when we approve a pilot, we look at HCD prepares the information, looks at, the rents in the building and all the other financials. And, we feel comfortable that this project would not work without this pilot agreement. On the difference between the pilot amount and the full tax rate, the question becomes, could you have something similar in that location at market rate? And, oftentimes the answer to that is no. So, I think of course, we would want to have something at market rate paying full taxes, but if we want to make these units available and continue to make these units available for people below the average median income, this is the choice we have to make sure those units get maintained or built. So I understand the concern about pilot rate and paying a lower rate, lower than the full tax rate. But we do have to ask ourselves the question, would there be a market rate development that would come in there tomorrow? And if that's not true in this case, it might make sense to continue to support a project like this so that we can maintain, in this case, a building where we have, a lot of units that are providing, housing for folks that are below the average median income.
Thank you, Deputy CFO. Mr. Mayor? Again, I definitely appreciate and welcome all the dialogue. I think what's at its core here is the city has a huge opportunity to ensure that the 88 units that are there, that those families have a place to go rest their head in dignity, and ensuring that when we see transactions like this, that we are going to be a part of, because at this point we're a part of this particular transaction, that we should ensure that as it relates to the livable conditions of our residents are part of any leverage that we have currently in being part of that transaction. And I think some of the things that I listed earlier are just concerns of mine because it's not in the deal. They've already said that they're not doing any major renovations, that they're really doing cosmetic work. And for the sake of keeping affordability just off of the quantity of a number and not the quality of a unit is something that I think the Department of Housing, Community Development, the administration, this board should really take at its heart, kind of understanding, knowing the sketchy history of Baltimore City and housing as it relates to affordable housing and the conditions associated with the housing. With that, I don't have anything else to add to the discussion. Are there any additional questions or concerns from members of this board?
Mr. President, make a motion to approve.
There's a motion on the floor. It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Please note me as a no vote for this particular issue. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Sorry you had to struggle through that, being the pinch hitter. With that, we move on to the next item. Non-routine agenda can be found on page 50, SB 2314566. Law Department, the request is to approve an agreement and settlement with CSX Transportation. On behalf of the Law Department, we have
We're going to have Kurt Heinrich, who's the head of our litigation, is joining us virtually.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Kurt Heinrich. I'm with the Law Department. This request pertains to a proposed settlement agreement with CSX in the amount of $100,000. By way of background, and I'll be very brief, as a result of the consent decree, which I believe was entered into with the federal government in about 2002, it's been going on for over 20 years now, the city was required to make significant upgrades and improvements to its sanitary sewer system. This particular incident relates to improvements to the Patapsco sewer shed. And in 2014, July 23rd, 2014, to be exact, the Board of Estimates approved a right of entry agreement with CSX. This agreement allowed and would allow the city and its contractors to enter CSX property that is on Ben Hill Road, that's known as the Curtis Bay Coal Terminal. There are significant and very large sanitary main lines and manholes on the property and that run underneath the property that necessitated the city to enter into this agreement. And again, that was in 2014. The sanitary contract is actually 903. And so beginning in probably about 2014 or 2015, the city sent in its engineers. And then finally, in around 2017 and in 2018, the city contractor began to actually do the work in and around the CSX facility. And so this settlement agreement relates to an incident whereby a city contractor was, for lack of a better word, I'm going to say caught, was observed decanting water that came from the sanitary sewer pipe. So as part of this process, the contractor was doing cleaning and relining of these very large sanitary mains. And as a part of that process, the water, the rinse water, and some sediment or debris is pulled back into a very large vac truck. Generally, once that vac truck fills up, it's supposed to be decanted somewhere else. Well, as it turns out, in this particular incident, it was decanted into a drainage ditch at the facility that fed a very comprehensive water filtration system. In any event, the contractor is working its own issues out with CSX separately. The city's liability or potential liability in this instance, again, pertains to the right of entry agreement and a breach of that agreement. The agreement, among other things, required the city to notify CSX promptly of any loss, damage, or injury that occurred arising out of the work. This was, at least during this period, was a 24-hour day operation. The city had a number of inspectors whose job it was to monitor the activities of the contractor. So this litigation began in 2019. It's been going on for 4 years. It went through extensive discovery. It went through extensive experts. It went through an extensive dispositive motions practice. And we're at the point now where the court has decided that whether or not the city committed a breach. And when I say breach, I mean that the city knew of or should have known of the inappropriate conduct of the contractor and failed to notify CSX in a timely manner. Now, whether or not there are economic damages associated with that alone is really a question mark. Where this comes in, where this settlement comes in, is the fact that the settlement agreement provides for attorney's fees and expenses and costs to enforce the agreement. And that's where this comes in. This is merely a settlement to satisfy that aspect of any potential judgment and take care of the uncertainty related to that part of a lawsuit. And I'm pleased to answer any questions that you may have specifically related to this.
Mr. Heinrich, thank you for your presentation. Just for the record, could you state how much the settlement?
It's for $100,000.
$100,000. Are there any additional questions or concerns from members of the board? Mr. Comptroller, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. I just wanted to go back and confirm a couple of the points. You said that there were a number of inspectors whose job it was to monitor the contract, and that the fact that we had a number of people employed whose job was to essentially be keeping an eye on the contractor and make sure that the work was being done properly. Because we had people doing that, that was why there was that's why the court is able to say that the city knew or should have known that the contractor was doing something wrong.
Yes, Comptroller, that is correct. That is correct. So again, this is not in settlement of a negligence claim, because obviously the city actually didn't do the inappropriate conduct. However, it goes towards breach of an agreement, breach of a contract, and that contract is the right of entry agreement, in which the city essentially guarantees that it will be monitoring the activities of its own employees and its contractors that would be performing the work on the CSX property. Okay. And there were again, it was a 24-hour operation. There were at least 3 inspectors, so they would have essentially 8-hour shifts on the 24-hour day. And for the most part, they were regular individuals, but obviously on occasion there might be additional individuals that would fill in.
So, Mr. Mayor, Mr. President, my concern is not with the settlement per se, and I don't have any further questions for the law department, but when we were getting our briefing on this in general, the law department was not aware that there had been any amount of discipline or status change inside DPW surrounding the inspectors whose inability to actually do this job has now cost us $100,000. And so I was hoping to bring up DPW to talk more about that side of it.
Yes, and Mr. Comptroller, I understand that we have Mr. Sion here from DPW to speak to that, with, of course, the note that, we can't speak about individual, personnel actions that may have been taken, but in terms of just talking in general terms about the contract that was in place with the inspectors and how that process would normally work.
Mr. Deputy Solicitor, I will endeavor to somehow strike a balance of passion and generality at the same time. Okay.
If you could come and address the
Yes,
comptroller's
sir.
questions.
I'm Paul Sane, I'm the acting bureau head for the Bureau of Water and Wastewater.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so what the way I would like to start, and as the solicitor points out, we're going to try to stay general to avoid personnel issues. But so the general question would be, is there a policy in place that DPW already has and is operating that would, in this kind of situation, provide for any structure or framework of discipline for inspectors who failed to catch or report the kinds of infractions that are bringing us into this particular situation?
So in general, we do have general policies for reviewing all of our staff's work, including our inspectors. So there is a process of reviewing what has been done, and then depending on the severity, there are various disciplinary actions that are potential.
What are some of those disciplinary actions?
It could be something from as simple as a write-up to suspension to termination.
Okay. Was there an investigation in the case of this particular situation into the work and performance of the inspectors on this contract?
That I don't know. I wasn't to see the time.
Okay. I think you have a colleague who
Yes.
wants to add additional information.
Good morning. Angela Cornish, Construction Project Supervisor.
Good morning.
With the Office of Engineering and Construction. At this point, we do evaluate all of our inspectors and the projects, and we go over, the IDRs, which is a daily report that they're actually required to provide. So on this particular incident, the inspector had to go and take care of some bodily needs. And as his back was turned, this incident happened. This particular incident, there was no disciplinary action. We do have the 3 levels of discipline, but there was no disciplinary action because I can't deny anybody that need to go and take
sure.
care of certain things. With us working around the clock, this guy was on the second shift. This happened late during the day, and it was on a Friday, and everybody was notified like that Saturday morning. The CXX, one of the CXX staff members, is one that actually says, we saw this. So in them seeing that and whatever else, and us, it was not a failure on our part to report. It was that the inspector at that time had stepped away, and as he stepped away, someone else on CXX staff had actually saw this and had reported it back to the Office of Engineering and Construction.
So, so as to try to continue to stay in the land of generalities and not cause ourselves or any of the other stakeholders in this additional legal concerns, let's actually step over to the cousin of generality, which is the hypothetical, and say, hypothetically, if there had been an assertion that there were multiple instances of infractions happening over the course of an extended period of time, if that had been asserted, would your policy have required you to investigate more than just one particular reported event and look at multiple inspectors and the entire scope of the job?
Yes.
Okay. But in this case, you're saying that did not happen.
In this case, I don't know, after it came to, after this particular incident, there was an investigation to see if there were any other incidents. And at that point, it showed that, there was no proof that there were any other incidents.
Okay.
But we would investigate, should we have any, SSOs that, it is our policy to actually investigate.
Okay, so I think, and I'm trying to figure out the way I can say this without getting any of us in trouble. I think what I would say then at this point is I'm going to thank you for your time this morning, and I'm going to sit back and be done with my line of questioning here in this venue, but I suspect that this conversation might continue in another format in a way that will put the city less at risk of further legal action.
All right, great. Are there any other questions or concerns from members of the board?
No.
Hearing and seeing none, entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and probably second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The item is approved. The next item on non-routine can be found on page 92, SB 2314-586, Department of Procurement. This request is to approve a goods and services contract amendment by Sodexo Live to provide food and beverage services for the Baltimore Convention Center. On behalf of procurement, we have
Good morning, President Mosby, Mayor Scott, Comptroller Henry, honorable board members, Adam Manny, your Chief Procurement Officer from the Department of Finance. We're asking for an extension of the current contract as we finish the procurement process for a new contract. This has taken a wee bit of time. If you indulge me a little bit, I'll give a quick, brief summary of where we are at the process. Originally, back in August 10th of 2022, the requisition was put into the system to start. It was assigned to a buyer on August 12th. Due to staffing turnovers, it went into a queue where nothing happened with it, and it sat there. This was then recognized, and on December 30th of 2022, it was reassigned to a senior buyer. We realized that this is a system issue and other things. Working with our partners in BSIT, they have been helping us generate reports to see if there are other items of this sort out there that we have been reassigning these. And we've also been working with our partners with Accenture and Workday to automate it so that if somebody leaves the bureau or leaves a position, that the work just doesn't sit in a queue, it automatically then gets rolled up in the hierarchy to their supervisor. Once the new senior buyer had it, we did a public posting on March 31st of 2023, where there was a pre-bid conference held on April 18th with an original due date of June 7th of 2023. Based upon questions, we extended that due date from June 7th to July 19th. There were 3 bids that were received. Those bids were then reviewed and scored by the selection committee. And then presentations were held the week of September 11th. All 3 bidders were brought in for presentations and oral interviews. Pricing was then opened on September 20th after the technical review was done. The pricing was looked at by one of our third-party consultants to do net present value calculations. And all 3 firms were then asked for a BAFO, best and final offer, by the end of October. At the same time, our business partners with SMBAD was reviewing it for the small minority women business goals. None of the 3 bidders had achieved those goals. So based upon those, we gave them the opportunity to cure that, and that was sent back out. We received the results back on December 15th, and SMBAD did their work on that, and based upon that, there were some questions that the selection committee had about the review, and the selection committee asked to have a meeting with Director Lundy and his staff to go through that. Once they have that meeting, it hasn't been scheduled yet, we should be able to then make a recommendation to this board on either moving forward to award a new contract. The issues that we have is, on the director of the convention centers here for additional questions. He does have contractual obligations going forward in the months of January to other firms to provide these services. The current vendor will not work without a contract, which is correct. And so we're asking for an extension of the current contract so we can finish our due diligence working through this and then come back probably the end of January, hopefully the beginning of February, to this board to make a recommendation for a new award. And I'll take any questions you might have on the process, or if you have any questions for the director.
Thank you. I think one question I have is, I believe from some of the emails going back and forth yesterday, it was determined that after we provided an opportunity for the 3 bidders to cure, that only one was able to do so.
Correct. And that the selection committee had questions for Director Lundy's office on how they did that review, that they wanted answered on how they made that determination.
How they made the determination and that they were, they had sufficiently secured the issue.
Yep. And they had some questions that they wanted to discuss with the office.
Do we know what the questions are?
I do not, sir.
So that took place in that took place in what month?
Friday?
So on Friday?
Friday of this month, last Friday.
Last Friday, it was determined, when was it determined that they met the qualifications associated with the curing process?
We were notified Friday. I'm being told it was this past Friday.
Okay, so Friday it was determined that one of the
three, after the cure, had met it, and then the selection committee had questions on the process of the review for the other two that they wanted answered. I don't know exactly what those questions are. And then a meeting is being set up between the selection committee and Director Lundy's office to review it, and then they'll have a final determination on how to move forward.
Got you.
and make a
Director Lundy, do
recommendation.
you have something to add to the discussion, sir?
Good morning.
You got a new look for us.
Thank you, sir. So on this one, because it's an ongoing procurement, I don't want to necessarily get into the specific issues of what's going on, but there's been a concern raised in the documentary submission that I want to review to ensure we have the correct answer and the correct number of compliant bidders prior to moving this item forward.
Got you. So I guess if that is done with the one remaining bidder, then the idea is we would move forward. Is that the strategy? I mean, what I don't want to happen is, I think this contract expired 2 or 3 years ago. I think that'll be our 4th extension for this particular contract. Obviously, that's not putting any competitive advantage for the city from the standpoint of why we do bids and why we have multiple people bid on those bids. So I guess who makes the determination if, back to you, Mr. the procurement czar, who would make the determination about whether we move forward or whether we throw the baby out with the bathwater and start this process all over again?
We would not throw this out and start all over again, sir. If the determination after the selection committee and the director's office have spoken, everything is met, we would make the award to the most responsive and responsible bidder who met all the terms and conditions of the RFP. At this point, there has been no discussion of canceling the RFP, though we have no legal obligation to make an award. There's been no discussion with my office to say, we're going to cancel it and start over. We would have to come up with we just can't cancel it to award saying we don't want to award. We would have to come up with a material change to the scope and specifications.
You just tried to do that
Well,
on something else that we pulled back, so
But-
I appreciate you saying that, but that's not always the
correct,
rule of
but
thumb.
we shouldn't be doing that. So
Correct.
based upon the conversations with the selection committee, Director Lundy's office, once those questions have been answered, we would then move forward with award to the most responsive and responsible bidder as we move forward with it. There's been, like I said, no discussion with my office to say cancel this and start all over, and I have no plans on doing that. We would come to this board with a recommendation.
Thank you, sir. Are there any additional questions or concerns? Mr. Comptroller?
I think a simple one at this point, which is, I know that we got the word back on December 15th that one of the 3 had been able to cure their lack of compliance. I was unclear on exactly at what point were the 3 initially ruled incompliant and given time to cure that, and how much time were they given to cure that?
So I believe that was at the end of October. I don't have the specific date, but it would have been pursuant to the procurement regulations. They would have had 10 days to provide their cured documents to get that back to procurement.
So
And
at
then
the
they
end of
forward that to
October,
us for review.
they were given 10 days to send you new stuff. And then essentially you had like a month to review all of it and get that information to procurement / the convention center?
So that's correct. So our normal
Okay.
review time is, for these items, is 21 days.
Okay.
So when it would have come back to us, we would have needed that much time to conduct the review. I'm uncertain of the specific date that that it would have been resubmitted to us, because with our process, we let it, those cure documents go back to the buyer. The buyer then resubmits it into our portal for review, and then the assigned compliance officer begins that secondary review of the new participation forms to see if they have achieved compliance with that set of forms.
So the opportunity to cure runs through procurement before it comes back to your office?
That's correct.
Gotcha, okay, all right.
So that accounts for some of the timing there. It's just really us going through that review. And now I just want to do an additional review because an issue has been raised in my review of the forms to ensure that we've reached the proper outcome and we have maximum choice on this bid. And we are going to be moving with haste because I know how much the convention center needs these services, and that I share in the board's desire to get out of continuous emergency procurements and prefer to do it in a way that goes through this honorable board.
That you have sparked a follow-up question, which, and I'll say right now, if it opens a huge can of worms, I'm happy to close it again right away and figure out this later. But is it worth considering whether in the future the policy should be shifted so that if there's a need to cure because nobody, was compliant, could that just work straight through your office where you just reach out directly to the people and say, you were found uncompliant, everyone was found non-compliant, and so you have 10 days to try again and have it, and take out procurement as the middleman? Is there a downside to that?
So downside is more of a policy call, so I would defer to the administration as to how we should do that. I'll say that it is now within the procurement regulation, so it's not actually an authority that I hold.
Okay.
And it's also within the discretion of either procurement or the procuring agency, whether they even exercise that 10-day cure notice. So I don't actually have control over that process. There are some additional cure provisions that I proposed in the draft that I have of the rewrite of the Minority and Women's Business Program that we're still discussing that would provide some additional cure options. But right now, it is actually a procurement regulation. And the only reason why we go through the buyer is to maintain the process, the procurement process, that the buyer is in communication with the bidders and that we're not directly communicating with them, and that our internal submission via the smart sheet to review these items goes from the buyer to us. Because I have been copied on.
File whole, sir.
Right, because I've been copied on emails, and those cure submissions would just come in via email, and then it runs the risk of sitting there or not going to the appropriate individual. So we've actually made sure that all of the cures go into the same process that an ordinary initial pre-bid review would go through.
I don't intend to try to micromanage this here, but I will point out that since it looks like we're getting ready to go into a very careful look at rewriting the procurement regulations, I would encourage this to be one of the issues that is addressed. And I will note in passing that procurement's files can be kept complete by careful and regular CCing of the communication. I'm just, and maybe this is definitely another conversation. I might just need a better grounding in the importance of best practices for procurement when it comes to the constant desire for everything to, all communication with the vendors to flow through them, even when that sometimes results in additional time in a process that is already sometimes lengthy.
I definitely understand that concern, and not to step on Adam's toes, but I would think one of my concerns is the fundamental fairness of the communication. And when we have, lack of a better term, too many cooks in the kitchen, we sometimes have messages that should not, and information that should not be shared with one bidder. And we're trying to make sure consistently that all the bidders receive the same information. So when those cure notices come out, that's the buyer will send that to all of those individuals. It'll have the detailed information about the defects in their bid, the timetable. So this is just really to make sure we're being fair across the board. But I'm definitely going to work with Adam, and we're working in close partnership as we go through this transformation to make sure we're doing this as efficiently as
Sir,
possible.
we have already had discussions moving forward on how we want to try and get this, as we continue to improve procurement.
I have long responded to the too many cooks in the kitchen with the rejoinder that, yes, but too few cooks in the kitchen and people don't get their food fast enough. So, you know, we gotta figure out how to strike that balance.
Yes, sir.
Agreed. I think that was the only question for these two. I did have a question for the convention center, if there are no other questions.
1 second.
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you too, Mr. Comptroller. I really do appreciate both of your level of concern about this item and the process. We know it's been a long road, but I also want to uplift a lot of what both our procurements are. I'm going to use that too, Mr. President.
You got a new title today.
And Director, and a clean-faced Director Lundy have been bringing up, and I know that Mac would do the same thing, about the importance of not only this contract, but the reason why they're asking for the extension. All of us have been allowing Director Lundy and his team's work for making sure that we are following and upholding and expanding our MBE regulations. And for them to do this, I think is something that we shouldn't gloss over, that they want to make sure that when we award this contract, we're awarding to the folks who are doing right by all of Baltimore and all of our businesses. So thank you, Director. Thank you, Mr. Czar, and thank you, Mr. President and Comptroller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With that, Mr. Matt Campbell, I guess the
Good morning.
the person that runs the palace.
I appreciate the compliment, Council President, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Comptroller, gentlemen. Good morning. Matt Campbell, Executive Director, Baltimore Convention Center.
So, I mean, just anything to add to, I mean, you're literally the subject matter expert of the facility, and
Well, so I would absolutely echo the mayor's comments because he stole my thunder. The opportunity to work with Mr. Czar and Director Lundy has been an absolutely fantastic experience and has given us a lot of hope and optimism for the road ahead. This contract is something that desperately all of us want to have off of our desk. We want to get awarded and move forward. These extensions are not something that we take lightly because there are folks on the other side of this contract that are waiting for a level of job security and understanding what their future holds. At the same time, we do have to make sure that this process is, as you could hear from Adam's comments, multi-tiered, multi-stepped, including flying teams in from all over the country to position why they should be the next caterer of record for the convention center. The committee has been very diligent with asking questions and getting their scoring in, and procurement has done a good job shepherding that. It just takes a minute. I just, for the record, the reason why this contract in its current iteration was created to begin with was because it was during the expiration of our catering contract in the middle of the pandemic. So there was no way to leverage attractive bids during that time. The first extension of that contract was also still, because we did 6 months the first time, not knowing when the pandemic would end. So the first extension was also due to we were a field hospital. There was no competitive justification for putting a bid out. And then the second extension, as Adam spoke to, was during a time of turnover, not only in his office, but in our agency as well. And doggone it, I really wish we could have used December, which is traditionally a slow period of time for the convention center business-wise, to make this conversion. The thought of looking at what the extension length was going to be was thoughtful on our part, looking at a mix of what business we have on the books, because this process, if we do not remain with the incumbent, is moving an extension of our staff, all of their people, all of their things out, transferring accounts of all of the catering business over to the new company. It's a months-long process, and ultimately we're responsible to making sure and upholding the quality of experience that our conventioneers and our clients have at the convention center. So doing that kind of potential turnover in the middle of a busy season would be a setup for a reputational and service delivery, I don't want to say disaster, but it wouldn't be good. It wouldn't be a best practice. So the the extension length aligns with the most appropriate time with, that would give, if the incumbent is not retained, the ability to move forward in a calculated method.
Got it. That clears up a lot. Truly appreciate that testimony. I guess you talked about December. Is there another month that transition kind of works out?
Based on our schedule, I mean, the convention center ebbs and flows. We're not consistent with the same amount of business month over month or even year over year. The pandemic has also kind of changed a lot of those booking windows. Traditionally, or currently, December, basically from Thanksgiving to now, would have been which was the original
Ideal.
target time, would have been ideal. The next really is early summer. We're in absolutely, starting mid-January, we are pretty consistently involved with not only volume of people, but multiple clients in the same week. That, again, would be an adverse move on our part to change midstream. So the extension is currently slated and suggested for 6 months, get us through June, where we have a 2-week window of no significant business. That with industry standard is at least 3 months of ramp-up time for a concessionaire to come in and line up their staff, figure out all the turnover documents, figure out where all the keys are, all that kind of stuff before they serve their first cup of coffee. And so with that understanding, given the circumstances surrounding the bid process, the only logical choice from my desk would be then for July 1st.
Gotcha. Now, do we have timeline on when we expect to, we won't know when we expect to kind of complete this process?
Late January or late February.
We would be looking to have the meeting between the convention center and SM Bad beginning of January, come to a final determination, and then get on the board agenda, hopefully, end of January, beginning of February, or in February, to make the recommendation to the board for an award.
But is it fair to say that that might result in additional concerns?
It's always a possibility,
Yeah,
sir. Just some of it's finalizing the negotiation with whoever the awardee is, and then coming forward to the board, which I would assume after the BAFO, it should go relatively smoothly between all parties. There's always a chance that there's a sticking point on a term and condition or something else that might raise its ugly head. And then it's getting the time. It takes 4 weeks plus to make sure we get it onto the board agenda correctly.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions or concerns for procurement? Director Lundy, Mac? Hearing and seeing none, entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and probably second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The item is approved. Thank you so much for your presentation today. And the next item on the non-routine agenda can be found on pages 157 through 159, SB 2314016, Department of Transportation. This request is to approve an increase to the contract value of Project 1246 Automated Traffic Violation Enforcement Systems with American Traffic Solutions Incorporated, DBA, Veer Mobility. On behalf of the Department of Transportation, we have.
Philip Mellerson. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. You could begin your presentation, sir.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council President and board members. As I mentioned, my name is Philip Mellerson, the ETBS Director for the Department of Transportation. To continue to improve the quality of life for the Baltimore City residents and those conducting business in the city of Baltimore and maintaining a safe and orderly transportation system, the Department of Transportation now seeks or desires to continue ongoing services with Veer Mobility, who is our speeding vendor, in the amount of $16,695,000. This also includes the JFX photo enforcement program, or cameras per se. This will cover the cost through December 31st, 2024. I'd also like to point out the success of the program. The analytical crash and violation data shows that speeding and motorist-related incidents has drastically slowed down at all photo enforcement locations throughout the city of Baltimore, as well as on the JFX. More than 75% of all citations, as well as speed data, shows have increased as well as driver behavior has been altered as far as erratic traffic behavior.
Thank you, Mr. Millicent. Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Is there a way for you to segregate out the 83 portion of this contract from the other speed light camera portion of this contract?
Well, Variable Mobility covers both school zone as well as photo enforcement on I-83.
There's no way for you to break down the numbers. I know that we extended the contract, and then we lumped in 83, but there's no way for you to tell us out of the $16.6 million, how much of that is for I-83?
I can get that to you, sir.
I guess you wouldn't know. Would you have access to the violation amount that the city's collected to date, say in like the past year or anything? Would you be prepared to kind of communicate that?
As far as citations issued,
Specific to 83. I guess all the questions and concerns I have regarding these contracts are specific to 83.
yes, sir. Give me 1 second. I can pull the information for you. I can tell you right now, in reference to the collections rate, we're right around 64.3%. And as far as citations issued, spare me 1 second, sir.
It's 300. It's about 380,000.
Yes, sir.
So from a finance perspective, do you know how much that calculates to, from a city from a revenue perspective?
I can get that information for you. I'm sorry. You said as far as
I think it's like $3 million when we look at this is just my quick math.
No, it's more than that.
How much is it?
For the whole program?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've collected about $9.5 million.
Just on 83?
On 83, because I remember when you look here at what we spent on 83, it was, we had a delta of about $1.5 million.
So annually, $3 million.
Well, no, it's the other way around, because this is 2 years, I think.
Annually, $9 million?
Annually, 750.
Annually, 7.5 million.
We would average 750 over the last a year over the last.
When you say 750, you're saying 7.5 million?
No, 750,000. In terms of, are you asking how much we collect total?
Yeah.
Oh, then it would be, annually it'd be between about 4.7 million? Yeah.
The real crux of where we are going, guys, is how much do we keep for the improvements of 83?
About, we've kept for the improvements on 83 just under $1.5 million total over the last 2 years.
So, and then the next question is, how much have we spent on maintaining the contract associated with 83?
Oh, well, that's subtracting the 8 million that we spent. So we collected about 9.5, and we spent about 8.
Okay, and that's the equation that I want to talk about today.
Okay.
So I think when we went down this path of looking at this I-83 contract, I guess the next question for you, Mr. Millicent, the comptroller would like to be your assistant today. He's taking over, but we'll go back to you, because I think this is probably a question that only you can answer. It is my belief, and I'm not sure, again, you're the expert, that we have the skill set from a Department of Transportation employee perspective, internal employees of the city of Baltimore, to do the maintenance and swap out of the 2 cameras that are functioning on I-83. Is that accurate or is that wrong?
Well, just to comment on that, sir, I can tell you right now, the city of Baltimore is one of the top 5 projects in the country. And if we're going to look at, the staffing capacity as well as the violation processing system, as well as expertise in which our consultant and subcontractor provides, I truthfully believe, I don't think we can do this in-house.
You say that one last statement, that last sentence again? We could not do it in-house? Or we could do it in-house?
Yes, sir.
Could or could
We
not?
cannot, no.
Cannot. And that's because of what?
Cannot.
Yeah, that's because of what?
That's due to, as I mentioned, what the subcontractor brings to the table in reference to the violation process and the software, the expertise in reference to construction for installation of cameras, as well as, the overflow of maintenance and the constant maintenance on the cameras as well.
So when, just to break a couple of those things down, constant maintenance, you're saying that's just the number of personnel, like resources, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and when we talk about software, that's just because we don't have a software, we're utilizing their proprietary software to kind of help us out there, is that right?
Yes, sir.
The evaluation, yeah, okay. So, and then when we talk about installation of the cameras, I think that we can kind of learn that skill set. I think the overall thing that I want to kind of harp on here, and what I talked about when we originally went down this path, is that we're, based off of the comptroller's numbers, it's like a $9.5 million pot that we have out there. The city's retaining 1.5 million of that pot and leveraging our vendor in this contract by sending out $8 million. That is just not a logical way of operating 2 cameras on I-83. I think Mr. Millicent has done an excellent job kind of going through the requirements of what it takes, from a software perspective. Obviously, that's going to come at a cost. What it takes from an installation perspective of 2 cameras, obviously, that's going to come at a cost. And what it takes from a maintenance of those cameras, obviously, that's going to come at a cost. But I would assume that cost is far south of $8 million as it relates to what we're putting out. And just kind of going to the theme of today, the structural deficit that we'll continue to talk about with the administration, with the finance department. As I discussed when we originally went down this path, this is an entrepreneurial opportunity for the city to, one, grow and provide upward mobility from a career perspective for workers in Department of Transportation, but an entrepreneurship type of angle for the city to continue to retain the limited amount of revenue that we have access to. I just don't understand why we are so pressed for 2 cameras on I-83 for us not to grow the skill set, the experience inside of the Department of Transportation, where we have able-bodied men and women who can do these jobs. Why we take that and we give it to a vendor that is not even a city resident. That's just what my concern is for all of these. So I know that we have a lot of different things on the table today as it relates to this contract. It was an opportunity for us to hold off in talking about this. I asked for a deferral to the beginning of the year so we could really dig into some additional detail. I know that when we went down this path before, a small question to the vendor, how much does it cost for you to, 1, procure the cameras, and 2, install the cameras? And they came back and told us that was proprietary, that they wouldn't provide us with that information. And again, we sit here today, and again, we know this is a delta of $8 million that's going out of the coffers of our revenue to this vendor that, to me, I don't know why we're in a rush to necessarily do. But again, this board has decided not to want to defer this particular item, to continue to discuss this item and understand additional details associated with this item, and it brings us to here. So with that, are there any additional questions and/or concerns? Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and we appreciate always your due diligence and your concern. I think a few things that I just want to highlight is that we're talking about, in instances, a lot of upfront costs. This is also having these camera programs run by outside entities is commonplace in cities around the country. It takes time. I know that if the director was on today, she's been doing a great job of helping to grow the talent in DOT, which I know that yourself, myself, and the comptroller knows. have had some before she got there, and especially a few years prior to us being in our seats, we had some folks who were pushing talent out of DOT, and she's doing a great job of trying to grow that talent. We're always looking at the fiscal aspect of this, as you very well know. If it were up to us, we would have more cameras on 83 because we know the folks typically who are driving and speeding on 83 and getting in accidents and running up the car insurance for our residents aren't residents of Baltimore City. We will look at both of those pieces of legislation changed in Annapolis, but we're going to continue to do that. But we also have to understand where we are today, how we're being strategic with these kind of investments and making sure that we're also following best practices from our other cities.
I appreciate that answer, Mr. Mayor. I would say that this is not being strategic. I think what being strategic would be was not to conflate all the cameras around the city into one deal, but to separate these two cameras. There are only two cameras, the most lucrative cameras in the city of Baltimore. I believe, and I appreciate the testimony from Mr. Millerson. I believe we do have the skill set in DOT to, one, install, procure the software, and ensure that we were keeping as much of the $8 million in-house as possible that would go to the improvement of 83, which is in desperate need of repairs and will continue to be in desperate need of repair. So I think that is the concern. I think another part of the concern of extending this contract is it was really an unsolicited bid. There was no competitive process by this. What we did at this board was we extended the existing contract associated with the speeding cameras. And then what the administration did, they latched this particular piece as we got the authority from Annapolis onto a contract that we had extended in the name of speeding cameras. So there was no competitive process associated with these extremely lucrative cameras. So again, from an entrepreneurial perspective, from a competitive pricing perspective of ensuring we're trying to keep as much of our revenue inside of the city as possible, I have very, very grave concerns about the strategy behind the I-83 cameras. Again, we're talking about two cameras, and we're talking about whether, we should continue down that path. So I just strongly suggest, obviously, it's the motivation of this board to vote this out today. It appears that we will do so. But I would strongly encourage the board, all four other members, that moving forward in the future, that we, one, segregate out the I-83 cameras, as I've asked before, as I've asked for information today about, but more importantly, too, that we drive a more competitive process, particularly if we're comfortable with not knowing how much our vendor is paying for these cameras and how much they're paying to install these cameras while making $8 million over the course of the time period that we talked about. Mr. Comptroller.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have a couple of comments. First, I do want to thank DOT for getting me the ticket and crash data and program cost information that I asked for, which was the reason we had asked for the first deferral of this, to make sure we could get that information. I do think it's important to share with the public that in 2021, the last full year before we began the program of having cameras on 83, there were 399 crashes on I-83 that year. In 2023, as of the end of November, we had only had 215 crashes. Money is nice, but keeping people from running into each other on 83 is really the point of the traffic control that we're trying to do. And I want to say congratulations to DOT because you've succeeded in cutting the number of crashes on I-83 almost in half, and that's with a smaller version of the program than we all initially expected there would be. And so I want to take this opportunity to tell the mayor I'm happy to join with the administration in supporting legislation at the General Assembly level that would allow DOT to either add more cameras in the other locations that were approved, or move the cameras that they have around from one location to another so as to continue to encourage drivers to maintain reasonable speeds along the entire stretch of 83 in the city. I also wanted to address the collections issue where we have had problems collecting from our, shall we say, out-of-state visitors. And I did have a conversation with the state comptroller about what would be involved in getting some reciprocity arrangements in place with neighboring states to make it easier for us to use their DMVs and registration processes as a stick to do collections in the same way that we do for our in-state violators. But the other thing I want to say is I want to, as the mayor did, I want to thank the council president, not just for his due diligence and his concern, but also for his experience that he's bringing to bear on this issue. All of us up here, we were something before we were up here. And in the same way that I hope that the rest of the board will listen to me when I talk about community development issues, having spent time doing that, it would behoove us to listen to the only elected engineer on the board when we're talking about what we should be able to do, technically speaking. And so I will take this opportunity to agree with the council president that if nothing else, the I-83 program is an ideal pilot opportunity to see if we could go back to doing something like this more in-house than we have been doing. And I will add my voice to his in saying that as we go through the remainder of the contract that we're extending today, that we do make preparations for, at its conclusion, the city to be able to pull at least the I-83 portion in-house. I will note that not only is there the possibility of saving money, but there is also the possibility of being able to show greater control over the program, and that may help us when dealing with the General Assembly when we're looking for additional authority from the state. And so that is the conclusion of my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. Are there any additional questions or concerns from members of this board? Hearing and seeing none, before we vote this out, I think it's important that I don't think it makes sense or behoove us to kind of belabor this topic. There's four other items that kind of roll up into the same type of niche. Again, going back to my original comments and questions and concerns, when we awarded this a couple years ago, it's still consistent to my concerns here today. But again, I don't think that makes sense to belabor. So before we take a motion on this, just to kind of address the other items, we're just going to kind of vote them out next as well, because again, I asked for a deferral, but I know it is the want and need by the other four members of this body to vote this out today. So with that, I'll entertain a motion for SB 2314016.
So moved.
It's been moved and probably second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Please mark me down as a nay, Madam Clerk. This item has been approved. The next item on non-routine agenda can be found on pages 160 through 162, SB 2314015, Department of Transportation. This request is to approve the increase of contract value for Project 1246, Automated Violation Enforcement Systems, Conduit State and Local Solutions. Is there any questions, concerns from members of this board?
So moved. Make a motion.
Hearing and seeing none, it's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Please mark me down as a nay vote. Madam Clerk, And then moving on to the other three that we moved to non-routine, that would be SB 2313356, Project 1246, Final Renewal Automated Traffic Enforcement Systems, ATVES, with MRA Digital LLC. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and probably second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Please mark me down as a nay vote. Madam Clerk, that item has been approved. The next item is SB 2313355, Final Renewal, Project 1246, Automated Traffic Enforcement Systems, ATVES, with American Traffic Solutions. Is there a motion on the floor?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and probably second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. Please mark me down as a nay, Madam Clerk. And then the last final item for the day is SB 2313354, Project 1246, Automated Traffic Enforcement Systems, ATVES, with Conduit State and Local Solutions. Is there a motion on the floor?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. Please mark me down as a nay vote. Madam Clerk, that closes us out. There's no new business on the desk of your Baltimore Board of Estimates. The next meeting will take place next year. This is our final meeting for the year, and it'll be Wednesday, January 10th, 2024. Happy holidays. Have a safe, happy holiday season and a happy new year. Baltimore, we absolutely love you.
You come right on through this. Hi, TV 25. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Estimates bid opening for December 20th, 2023. We're calling it a bid opening today, but we really aren't opening any bids today. We are just sharing addenda that have been received by agencies who are issuing bids and some date changes to go along with those. Up first, for Department of Public Works, WC 1326, the SCADA, SCADA DCS Water Facility Design. This bid is being delayed in opening until January 10th, 2024. The Bureau of Procurement, RFQ 461, sodium hydroxide caustic soda. This bid was originally scheduled to be opened today, but will be opened on January 10th, 2024. Bureau of Procurement, RFQ 478, design and construction of conduit and fiber optic cable at multiple locations. Originally scheduled for today, will be opened on January 10th, 2024. The Bureau of Procurement, RFQ 432, police uniforms and tailoring services, originally scheduled for today, will be opened on January 10th, 2024. Department of Public Works, ER 4127, Environmental Restoration, Project 11, originally scheduled for today, will be opened on January 24th, 2024. And finally, for the Bureau of Procurement, RFQ 407, 911 Nurse Triage Line Services, the technical only, originally scheduled to be open today, will be opened on January 24th, 2024. And that concludes our announcements for today. So as you all could tell from our announcements, our next bid opening is January 10th, 2024. And we will post all these addenda on our website where you would normally find the bid results for the day. And I thank my team for keeping us all organized in 2023, and we look forward to seeing you in 2024. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, TV 25.